Welcome to Trestle Times Talks, the voice of Franklin, New Hampshire. This is brought to you by the Franklin Communications Group, which is a nonpartisan, volunteer-powered network bringing local news and community stories to your ears. Subscribe to stay informed, share to keep your neighbors in the know, and if you've got news to share, the contact details are in the show notes. Now, here's what's happening in Franklin.
All right. Welcome to this episode of the Trestle Times Talks podcast. I'm Delaney Carrier. Currently serve on the City Council representing Ward 1. Formerly served on the school board for 8 years. And today I am sitting with active City Manager Scott Clarenbach. Afternoon, Scott.
Afternoon.
Good to see you today.
Nice to see you.
Would you mind introducing yourself for anybody out there that doesn't know your background and history of work with the city?
Sure. Scott Clarenbach, pretty much a lifelong resident. I actually wasn't born in Franklin, but spent all my childhood here, graduated Franklin High, and got a degree in fire science. Went to Durham UNH Fire Department for 2 years before I came to Franklin. Returned home to Franklin Fire and worked 26 years in Franklin Fire Department, 16 of those as the fire chief. And during that time, I was acting city manager a couple of times. And then I left at a ripe old age of 45 because the retirement system said I could. Taught for 6 years at Lake Street Community College, and then did some board work at LRG Healthcare.
I'm Delaney Carrier. Currently serve on the City Council representing Ward 1. Formerly served on the school board for 8 years. And today I am sitting with active City Manager Scott Clarenbach. Afternoon, Scott.
Afternoon.
Good to see you today.
Nice to see you.
Would you mind introducing yourself for anybody out there that doesn't know your background and history of work with the city?
Sure. Scott Clarenbach, pretty much a lifelong resident. I actually wasn't born in Franklin, but spent all my childhood here, graduated Franklin High, and got a degree in fire science. Went to Durham UNH Fire Department for 2 years before I came to Franklin. Returned home to Franklin Fire and worked 26 years in Franklin Fire Department, 16 of those as the fire chief. And during that time, I was acting city manager a couple of times. And then I left at a ripe old age of 45 because the retirement system said I could. Taught for 6 years at Lake Street Community College, and then did some board work at LRG Healthcare and Franklin Savings Bank, and 12 years in the Franklin City Council, where I was also the interim mayor for 7 months. So I've pretty much had almost every position in the city of Franklin in one capacity or the other, and I think that's probably why I was reached out to for this vacancy.
Seems like a pretty easy fit.
Yeah, seems like a pretty easy fit.
Thank you very much for stepping up.
Yeah, well, you thank my wife because she's the one that actually said to do this.
She voluntold you?
Yeah, she voluntold me. Yes, she did.
So how long will you be in this position?
By charter, it allows for 180 days. So that brings us to the end of August or so.
All right. And what is the process that we are undertaking now for selecting a new city manager?
Yeah. So the city council has engaged with MRI from Plymouth, New Hampshire to find a replacement city manager. So they'll go through a discovery phase right now, which is actually providing the qualities that they're interested in finding a candidate. And then they'll advertise, they'll actually sort through the candidates first round, and then they'll ultimately get some down to 2 or 4 candidates for an interview, and the council will interview and hopefully find a qualified candidate.
And then you'll walk off into the sunset?
Yep, I'm going to go back to retirement. Yes, I will.
And what are your retirement plans?
I don't really have any formal plans, but I've got a tractor, so I go around and help the neighbors with whatever jobs they need to get done with the tractor. So I just
spend some quality time outside.
Outside time in the tractor is best retirement plan there is.
Very, very nice. I like it. So we have a series of questions today. the citizens of Franklin, we face a lot of issues. So I'll jump right into, I guess, the most pressing issue. How do we fix our roads in Franklin, Scott? What are we going to do here?
I mean, the problem with the roads in Franklin is that our roads, we have bad roads just like other communities do, but unfortunately we probably have a few more bad roads than most communities do. And it really goes back down to not having a capital improvement plan to invest in the roads on a regular basis. So I've told this story a couple of times that when we were kids raised in our neighborhood up off Myrtle Ave, we had a neighbor whose house was battleship gray. And the whole time we were kids, it was this ugly color of battleship gray. And we thought that it was painted from leftover World War II battleship paint and never got changed. And the house and the elderly couple got older and older. But their house pretty much decayed while we were raised in a house next door. And they didn't put any money into it. They became aged, lived in place, and then one of them passed, and then the other one ended up going in a nursing home, and they ended up going in. A speculator bought it and ripped it down to the studs, took the siding off of it, had to re-roof it, and put in hundreds of thousands of dollars probably, and then sold the house as a flip. And I think that's the same analogy you can make with the city of Franklin, is that we've chosen to, under the cap, run ourselves to the point of almost no return, especially in the roads, schools, and other areas. So I think we've got to come to the realization that the tax cap is something that is limiting us in our community, and we need to figure out the right balance of fiscal responsibility, but also making sure that we invest so we don't end up with infrastructure that's so far behind.
Right. So the city council recently approved a capital improvements plan. And I believe on every single page that dealt with roads in that plan, there was a description of the need to invest $2.5 million a year for 20 years in order to bring all of our roads back up to suitable repair and then be on a roads maintenance, a 20-year roads maintenance schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to do that, how do we functionally come up with $2.5 million a year to invest in our roads?
Well, I don't think that's quite going to be possible unless it's going to be a patchwork. I think Councilor Warner had mentioned that in order for us to get out of this scenario, we're going to have to find a patchwork of things. We're not going to be able to bond ourselves out of this problem. We're not going to be able to cut ourselves out of this problem and cut and reduce services. So it's going to have to be some of all and a little bit of each, and trying to figure out how to best tackle this problem. The analogy of kicking the can down the road has been used a lot. This can, especially with roads in Franklin, is pretty much flat. There's no can left. It's pretty much just a piece of jagged metal. So at this point, we're going to have to figure out a plan that works, and it's not going to happen overnight because we didn't get into this situation overnight. It's been, the last road I remember that the city paved with only taxpayer dollars, I think, is Smith Hill Road. And that had to been early Ken Merrifield mayor days. So, we're talking
early 2000s.
Yeah, we're talking 15, 18 years at the minimum, probably more than that.
Right. So we're roughly 20 years out from actually investing in our roads.
Right. We've had some roads that included water and sewer work. So we had the water and sewer customer help pay for it. ARPA just did South Main Street, so that was federal money. Yeah. So there has been some road work done, but with only local taxpayer money, it's been 15 plus years, 20 years.
Right.
Probably.
Central Street was done.
Yep, as an overlay.
That was 7 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, 6-7 years ago,
yep.
Maybe 8 even. And that was an overlay. So that was with taxpayer dollars, but that was actually not a full road reconstruction.
And I thought at least part of that was state. There was excess state revenue that year that they granted out to communities.
Yeah, I remember them doing it. I was on the council. I just don't remember. I think there could have been some additional funds that came in, or unanticipated revenues that came in.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to try to find. I do think of late that the roads have gotten to the point where I think the constituents, the constituents actually are feeling the pain of the roads, and I think that that's going to raise their awareness level or maybe their involvement in city government to figure out what is going to be the plan.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I tell this story repeatedly myself as well. I spend at least $2,000 a year on vehicle repairs, repairs that are damage caused by the condition of our roads.
Mhm.
And to me, it makes more sense to pay that $2,000 extra in taxes and fix our roads, right? Rather than investing in my vehicle, because every time you invest that money, the vehicle gets worse and worse and worse, and just like the roads get worse and worse and worse as we don't invest in them. But back to the tax cap discussion here. So the tax cap has, under the tax cap statute, there are three parts. Right? We have the base revenue that the city generates from property taxes every year. That base revenue is increased by a factor of the CPIU, which is a factor of inflation that increases our taxes every year. That's part A. And I don't believe Franklin has ever used parts B and C of the tax cap, which would be using bonds to fund infrastructure and resetting the tax base to help us keep up with the real demands of inflation. And every other, there are a number of tax cap cities in the state, and every other tax cap city uses all three parts of the tax cap to fund the needs of the city. With your history in the city, can you describe maybe why Franklin has never used parts B and C of the tax cap?
Yeah, I think that the city has taken a referendum a number of times, and they feel that the voters have resoundingly stated that they want the tax cap. I think I call that the Walmart theory. I think that there's lots of people that don't like to go into Walmart, but a lot of people do go there because prices are cheaper. And I think that's the challenge that Franklin has, is that we've been underneath the tax cap longer than any other community in the state. It was 1989 when we actually got the tax cap, and it was put in and adjusted over the years to make sure that on a reval year and all those, you couldn't have a pickup that was actually damaging to the tax rate. So, or to the actual amount raised by taxes. So I think, I mean, obviously we're sitting in City Hall. City Hall is the first time that there was a bond done outside of the cap, what's considered outside the cap. But it, as you stated, it's an exception that's allowed. The purists in the cap are going to think that that means the cap is broken. It isn't what that means at all, but that's the exceptions that are allowed to be utilized. So I think that balance is there. I don't. Usually, what happens in Franklin politics is when there's an actual crisis or perceived crisis, different people will run for city council, and there's an opportunity of each year of 3 members of the council being turned over, depending on what the angst or concern is from any concerned citizen group. So I would say, other than that I think Franklin is just tight on the cap. I think that there's a feeling that it's a strong piece, but as I mentioned, I think roads are going to be the thing that's going to change the tide, because unlike the schools, where the schools have obviously been underfunded for a number of years, decades, and what's happened there is it's only affecting a small number of people that send their children to school or grandchildren or whatever else. Roads, everybody drives on the roads, and as the roads get worse condition, it's going to become much more apparent of where we are.
Right. So if we don't do anything different, we're just going to keep going down this same road and not making any progress. So the other way that we can generate more tax revenue in the city is through what in the government circles are called pickups.
Mhm.
So when a property is improved, a bare piece of land has a new structure built on it, the taxes from that new structure are added to the tax base. If an existing property is substantially improved, the taxes for those improvements are added to the tax base. So that helps us generate more tax revenue. And more broadly, we call this economic development.
Mhm.
How do you see the process of economic development working, and how should that work for the city of Franklin? And what are the benefits?
Sure. I mean, economic development, as you mentioned, is adding to the tax base. And the more you can grow your tax base, the less everyone should have to have a burden of paying for whatever the bills are. The challenge we're having right now is this year for the 26 budget preparation, we have $4.99 million in pickups. The county, Merrimack County, actually, their increase this year is 5.5%. So all of the growth that we've had in Franklin doesn't even pay or collect enough money to pay Merrimack County's tax burden. So the difference is going to have to be made up by the CPIU that you mentioned earlier. So that's the challenge, is that without economic development, we're going to see more and more reliance on only the CPIU. And the CPIU is sort of inverted, because when the economy is good, the CPIU is very low. And when the economy is bad, CPIU is high. So it's almost, you've got an opportunity like we did in the previous 3 years. You had a 7%, a 5%, a 4% when the economy and the prices were all rising, was the opportunity where the city could actually charge more to their taxpayers, who are already being burdened by increased prices on consumer products. So it's sort of an inverted piece that's there. So as far as the economic part, the challenge that Franklin does have is that we don't have a lot of open land that's available for development. So you're not going to see a lot of 60 and 70 house developments in Franklin, just because the good property was actually utilized by the mills to make the multifamilies on the bottom of the bowl here. If you think about Franklin, it's got a fair number of hills, and we're sitting at the bottom of the bowl here. So that's a challenge. So as you had mentioned, the other way to do that is to take an underutilized building, renovate it, have money invested into it, and see a return.
Right, and that's what we've done the last several years here. We have several mill buildings that have been rejuvenated into housing.
Mhm.
There's a couple of buildings right on Central Street that have been rehabilitated and put back into full use. There's still many opportunities here on Central Street to do that as well.
Mhm.
I'd like to move on to some other questions around town. I think let's see. So today is May 6th. There was a city council meeting last night, May 5th. One of the questions that came up there was nonprofits reporting to the city manager and city council, and kind of a lack of communication taking place along that. How would you go about resetting these processes, and how do you see those communication processes as being best used and the benefits?
Yeah, I think that Franklin has always been a volunteer-oriented community. There's a lot of people giving of their time and their energies to provide opportunities for underserved or for sports and activities. So I think the challenge there is that when there are agreements, and the mayor currently has an MOA committee that she's starting to create. I do think that there's an opportunity there to sort of look at what is out there currently, what is allowed, what isn't. Are we following the rules and regulations? I think there's been a certain amount of unattentiveness to making sure that things are getting done the way that we agreed to, both parties agreed to. So I think some type of checks and balance on that would be important, because, again, I don't think we survive as a community without our volunteers. I think or if we did, it would be a much darker community. And it's just trying to find out that if people are making agreements, that we're following through on those, both sides, the city and the volunteer group.
And who's responsible for keeping that communication flowing and making sure these things are happening the way that these agreements have been laid out?
I mean, yeah, the city manager should be in charge of making sure that those lines of communication are open. Obviously, if there's a department specific, that could come through that individual department. If there's somebody at Parks and Rec that directly related to Parks and Rec, it could go through Crystal Elpers is the director. But I think overall, making sure that the agreements are being fulfilled, it's the responsibility of the city manager.
All right. So the city also has a number of boards, commissions, etc. If someone's interested in volunteering for a board or committee, what's the process for a citizen in Franklin to apply to take part?
Sure. We're trying to use the blast emails to notify people when there is a vacancy in a board or commission.
And can you just explain that a little bit and how people
Sure.
get those
Sure.
emails?
Yeah. You can go on to franklinh.com, and it's actually on the website. There's actually a box.
.org, I think, right now.
Yeah, it's
Don't go to .gov.
Yeah, we're going to .gov, but so .org as far as the website's concerned. And on the website, on the left-hand side, there's a piece to sign up for email blasts.
Okay.
And so you would actually click in, just give your email, and it will distribute when there's council meetings or whatever. And we are using that to try to make people aware when there's a vacancy on boards and commissions. So the big thing there is there's a prospective appointee form. It's very one page, very easy. Just wants to know what your contact information is, how long you've lived in Franklin, your occupation, you're retired, whatever it happens to be, and then your interest of what boards you're interested in serving on. And then that gets funneled. Some boards and commissions are appointed by the mayor, some are appointed by the city council. So it depends on what the boards are, which group appoints to that, and then your application would be considered at the next opportunity.
Where does those forms get submitted to? Is that
they can come here to City Hall, and we'll take them at City Hall, and we'll hold them for the next meeting whenever they get appointed.
And do you know what boards, commissions are currently taking applications for appointments?
Yeah, I think the Heritage Commission is still taking applications. We just had an opening for the zoning board. We've got a couple of applicants that came in the last day or two for that. And I believe that's it at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, the TIF, we got the downtown TIF for the downtown TIF. We're trying to figure out the criteria. The TIFs actually have a little different component because there's most of the boards and commissions, you just have to be a resident. The TIF, there's actually quite a bit of criteria in reference that you might have to work or reside in the district, or then you might have to be a resident and work in the district. So there are some other criteria for that one as opposed to most boards and commissions just have to be a resident.
All right. And are you aware of any other positions that might be coming up soon?
Well, there's a Ward 2 position coming open, I believe, because Olivia Zink is moving out of the city.
That current council person?
Correct, Ward 2 City Council. So that vacancy will be coming up, I would think. I do already have like 3 or 4 people who have shown interest in that, so I have their applications, but I'm sure we'll see more.
All right. Excellent. Is there any other information you'd like to share with the community while we're sitting here talking?
No, I mean, I involve, I think everybody should get involved to whatever level they're capable of. I think a community becomes a better community when people do involve themselves, whatever they can give. It doesn't have to be only time, money, whatever it is that you have an opportunity to give. I think we all get a little bit better by doing something for our community and giving back.
Thank you. And how can people get in touch with you as city manager? if they have questions regarding the city.
As city manager, you can call me at 603-934-3900 or reach me via email at citymgr@franklinnh.org.
All right, thank you very much. We also have Randy Kovack here, who has a couple of questions for you, following up from our previous podcast regarding the makerspace.
Yes, thank you. Delaney, how are you? Start with that, the official title. Everything good?
Yes,
I've been
everything's
sitting
well.
there listening to you, so
Yeah.
we'll take a minute.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things I seem to find when I've been listening over the last 4 years to meetings is I think the greatest thing we can do here is add new business. In business, the more business you have come in, or industry or utilities, the more income, more taxes is added to our base, and we don't have to raise it on our individuals. The other one we started talking about is bonds. Before I go into the whole makerspace and explain that, could you give a summary as best as you can for a 12-year-old? See what you can do to help define what a bond is and how it impacts our life.
Sure. So a bond is actually a borrowing of money for usually longer term projects or events. So what would happen is that like a car loan, if you're looking to buy
Or
a
mortgage
car,
or
a mortgage for a house, if you're looking to buy something that's too expensive to come out of your regular checking account, you would actually set up an arrangement so you could pay monthly in making payments towards that. And usually, like I said, it would have a fairly lengthy life. It wouldn't be something that you would use and be done with it in a few months. It would be something that would last, 7, 10, 20, 30, 50
Okay.
years.
So, as an example, excuse me,
Yeah.
if you do simple math and you have a house and you have, say, a 1% mortgage, so on $100,000 or on $1,000, you're paying 1%, or actually that's not right. It's $10, right?
Yeah.
All right. So every homeowner has to go through this by the $1,000, and if we needed $10 million, if you take and do all the work on that, how much would that raise per month to our average homeowner? Can you do something off the top of your head with that?
Probably
Yes.
not.
Well, give me your own example.
No, that I think any time that the city borrows money, they're trying to accomplish something on a wider scale or a broader scale,
Like a road.
So I mean, there's a number that gets kicked around about $1 million a mile.
Okay.
$1 million a mile isn't really accurate unless you're chewing up the asphalt and actually doing a fair amount of grinding, or you have granite curbing from sidewalks and things like that. If you do a country mile, it's not going to be $1 million a country mile. But the problem is we have over 60 miles of road in the city of Franklin. So that, that 60 miles is currently in fairly poor shape, majority of it. So those are the challenges, is how do you find a way to bond that amount of money in any given period of time? Because normally bonds for roads are going to be 15, 20 year long bonds.
You wouldn't hope not much longer.
Correct. Well, actually, I had a gentleman that came in to the city hall 2 weeks ago, and he told me that School Street was paved 42 years ago, because he actually
It feels like it.
Right. Yeah, it does. But he actually stated he was paving it with R.D. Edmonds, and it was 42 years ago.
So what you're telling me is 2 generations of our children
Correct.
have walked up and down that street.
I did
have
as a child.
never been on a finished street.
Correct.
You can say that
Newly-
almost about the whole town.
Correct. Yep. Newly paved roads in Franklin are a unicorn. There's no question about that.
So that makes a very, very, well, how do I say this? For a new business to come in, they like services. Do you agree?
Yep.
And so when you don't have good roads, they're going to know it.
Yep.
And when you have empty windows downstairs or down in the downtown area, they're going to know it.
Yep.
And so if you apply that to all the individuals, and then all the guests we get in, all the visitors that come through throughout the whole season, which is about ready to start. Why would a business want to move here? Can you give me a thought that would say, why would they want to come here?
Yeah, I think that most business decisions are made because of the manpower of who's available for your workforce. And then you're going to get into what other distractions are there to make a decision. So once you find your workforce, you've actually got a facility that's enough square footage. Can you find the other pieces? Are you able to say that those other pieces aren't really that important if you can find the property and find the help?
The location,
Right.
location.
I'm not in real estate, but
But
that's what they say. That's what they
Right.
say.
Okay.
So they say location, location, location. And obviously here, we're a little bit away from 93, but not that far away from 93. So if you need to go north or south, it's great. If you need to go east and west with your projects, it may be not such a great place because east and west here is a little bit more challenging. But I do agree with you. I think that when you are looking to place a facility in a community, you're looking at a number of different factors, and roads would fit into that. Schools would fit into that as far as if you're looking for your employees to live close by to where you're looking to open your business.
So I think you might agree, and probably anybody in the audience, that this town or the city is actually a very unique and special place. And to save it, we have to want to do something. We can't sit there and let it just keep decaying.
Mm-hmm.
So there is an idea in the world. It's happened many times. It's called an incubator. Basically, an incubator is a place where you start something, a pilot. So let's just use the example of T-shirts. You get somebody to make some T-shirts, and then you make a business out of it, and that money stays in the local area. One idea floating around is the idea of a makerspace. Define that for the audience. I'm sure you know what it is. A makerspace is basically an open space with a lot of different tools. And people who have a business might be missing one piece. If you've ever worked on a car, you need a specialty tool, especially when you're finishing the engine. All of a sudden, you got one wrench you need that costs $40. You use it one time, and it sits in your drawer for the next 40 years. So that's the thing of a makerspace. It allows you to go in and use a printer, a 3D printer, or a drill press, or whatever. That tool's there. You've got all of the other 98%, but you don't have one part to finish your job. In a makerspace, you can allow an old guy like me, who's retired, to go in there and learn something new and start a business from that, or a hobby. You could take a young kid out of high school that doesn't have anywhere to go and teach him a lesson or two, and he can start a T-shirt business. It's not hard to start that. And in fact, we don't have a T-shirt business in this city. It seems like it's an obvious business, but all you'd have to do is give them a start, get enough money, and they can build their own stuff. So if that's one way to bring in more money, then can you think of any other ideas that might be as off the wall as that one? Any thoughts on why?
As far as other ways to bring in money?
Or to bring in business?
Yeah.
Specifically.
I think businesses are attracted to other successful businesses. I mean, people are going to look to settle a new business, if it's a microbrewery or if it's whatever it happens to be, a restaurant. They're going to see if there are other successful businesses.
So we can say, as an example, the Opera House, which is in need of great repair, brings in people for up to 30 miles an hour.
Sure.
You mentioned the breweries, and we also have the kayak.
Right.
Kayak man to help us bring in people.
Sure. I think that I've said all along that the challenge that there's no place in New Hampshire that is like out in Montana or Idaho where there's tumbleweed blowing across through the main street and it's desolate. I mean, there's nobody living here.
Sure.
There's going to be somebody living in Franklin. Right. It's, are we thriving or are we dying on the vine? I think that's the point, is where are we in that cycle to try to make sure that the community is in good hands. And I think those are the challenges because I don't think many businesses are going to want to invest in a place that they think is dying on the
Well,
vine.
it's interesting. Some big cities have gone into bankruptcy
Mhm.
when they have a problem,
Mhm.
but they go into bankruptcy because their debt is 200% their income.
Correct.
We have this unique problem. We
We
only
don't
have
have-
3% debt.
Correct.
So if you have only 3% debt and you can pay your bills all the time, you clearly are not doing something right,
Mhm.
so that you can then make a difference
Yeah.
to the rest of
Yeah,
the town.
I think our operating budget is a larger portion of our budget, and capital has never been a priority.
Mhm.
Previous to the last manager, so under the previous administration, every time that a bond retired, it would actually just move over, the payments and the interest would move over to the operating budget.
Okay.
And it would actually help support the operating budget. So that's where, when I gave the visioning to the city council, the vision that I have is that we have to sustain some level of capital
Right, a
in
bonding
the budget. Right. We have to find ways to bond. We have to find money to pay the bonds. That's an unusual situation, but it's because our operating budget is as large as it is. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but we are where we are,
Right.
and we've got to figure a way to unwind that. And that may come through some reduced services, that may come through some different priorities, but we've got to find a way to be able to pay some capital. I was on the council for 12 years. 8 of those years I voted no on the budget because there was no capital in the budget. And I just couldn't, in good conscience, vote for a budget that didn't responsibly take care of the capital.
You know, I was just thinking while you're talking about this, my parents grew up during the Depression, and we grew up. My entire life, my parents had just a mortgage. You know, the car was paid off, everything was owned outright. Oh, we didn't have it, so you either bought it right to the spot. You probably had a similar upbringing to that,
Yeah.
and the mortgage was very unusual, as I said. You tried to pay as much off as you could before you bought it. But nowadays, you can't really get along without a mortgage. The prices are so high that it's almost, unless you're one of the very rich people, you in a normal middle class environment are going to have a mortgage. And we need a mortgage, which is a bond.
Correct.
Because we can't go bankrupt. There's nothing to go bankrupt on.
Right.
We have nothing to bankrupt.
Correct.
So that means we either go along on this three-wheel tricycle trying to figure out how to get up hills when we really need a motor scooter or something with some power to help us get up the hill. Well, from there, if you have any thoughts about a bond that might help the youngsters, I've tried to give a couple images along with what you're saying. Do you have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I think, as I had mentioned earlier, the patchwork is the way we're going to get out of this. I mean, we are going to have to bond more than just the $6.8 million that was bonded for this building that we're currently sitting in.
Right.
And that's the challenge, is what does that bond look like? How long is that? But that just really kickstarts the road program. That does not sustain the road program. So even if you were talking about an $8 or $9, $10 million road bond, we're not going to finish even 25, 30% of the roads. So then you got to find a way to actually pay for ongoing money that's coming out of the budget that would go towards roads to sustain it. I mean, Belmont's another community that's fairly similar to Franklin's size. There's 8,100 people instead of our 8,800. They have like a $1.3 billion assessed value. We have like a $1.1 billion. So there's a little difference there. But Belmont, prior to the last 2 years, had put $1 million a year into roads. So if you drive around Belmont, you will find a few bad roads. You can do that in any New Hampshire town, but you'll find a lot of roads that are very good, in good condition.
Yeah, which is the idea.
Right. Well, the idea should be that there should be a certain category of each of those.
Even the low, even
some that are in poor condition.
Yeah.
There's going to be some, but
Right.
Unfortunately, our numbers are
a little bit higher. Just to say the least.
Just, I think a little bit more than that, Randy. But
okay, it's a little bit higher than that. Let's say 100%.
Yeah, right.
All right. Okay. So, any other thoughts?
No. I think you both have a pretty good knowledge of what is happening in Franklin. I think that the challenge is to educate the public, and this is an opportunity to do that. And hopefully, as more people become educated, they can figure out what the best course is. And no matter what we do, if we raise taxes, have a bond, do whatever, there are going to be people that think that that's the wrong thing to do.
Right.
But we're trying to do this for the largest number of citizens.
Yeah, we have to look at the overall group.
Correct.
And-
That's our responsibility, is to try to
first.
do for the most,
Yes.
not for all.
And also for those visitors that come through, because
Sure.
they bring a lot of money to this town.
Yeah, yep.
And we want them to come in and enjoy it.
Mhm.
In fact, just today I met a couple that have just moved in, and we're walking through the library for the very first time,
Yep.
and they were asking questions.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see somebody new,
Sure.
a younger couple
Yeah.
coming to join us. Okay, well, thank you very much, Scott, for your time. Delaney, any other thoughts before we close out?
Just another thank you, Scott, for giving us your time today and sharing with the rest of the community here.
No problem. Thank
All
you.
right, Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Trestle Times Talks from the Franklin Communications Group. Like, subscribe, and share to support local voices. And if there's news we should cover, our contact info is in the notes. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay Franklin strong.